Black Swan from, let me pull up the date really quickly here, from 2010, directed by Darren Aronofsky, starring Natalie Portman, Mila Kunis, bunch of other people, scored by Clint Mansell. So this one is on my list for representing how score can really underscore the tonality of a movie. To me, first of all, this score in this movie is kind of my intro into the world of ballet. Like, I didn't even know what a Swan Lake score is, so I sort of came in very cold into this. So the score is obviously doing that job of kind of laying out the blueprint and the baseline of what does the ballet score, and specifically in this case, the Swan Lake score, is all about. But then it's kind of doing some very interesting tonal things with this score, trying to balance the internal and external horror situations of the lead character as well as this whole ecosystem of ballet, which I thought was very interesting. On one hand, you have sort of the jump scares, if you will, that the score elicits, which to me represent the external horrors of what is happening every time Winona Ryder shows up, for example. But then it's being underscored and undercut and further layered with the internal and psychological kind of scares and dilemmas of Natalie Portman. And there's some like really interesting, weird kind of dichotomies that the score is balancing. It's trying to kind of, create this balance between her vulnerability and tenderness because she is that way, but then also balancing her ambition and how she's crossing over to the dark side. There's this balance of reality and as well as this heightened reality, because in her mind, she's literally turning into the Black Swan, like literally, where feathers are going out of her back. So all that is being handled by the score as well, which once again creates this balance of like unsettling feeling, but also very seductive, because this world is very seductive to her and to the audience as well. So yeah, I was blown away by the score when I watched this movie for the first time. I really hadn't watched the movie ever since until in preparing for this podcast, but I've listened to the score a lot since then. Especially I find myself when I'm in a mood where I'm kind of toying between crossing over to the dark side. Not that I ever do it.
Right.
But this score represents that to me, because it's so like, yeah. So I don't know. It's just a brilliant score. If you remove the score once again from this movie, I don't think the super complex tonality of this movie actually works. It's a different movie, totally. Like, it would not be this internal and external psychological horror, insecure, ambiguous sort of movie that it ends up being if the score is not there. So pretty brilliant. The movie on rewatch, not as good. Okay.
Oh,
pretty
interesting.
Good.
Okay.
Pretty good, but not the way it was when I watched it the first time, because it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I had actually the exact opposite reaction to this
Really?
film. When I first saw it, I didn't like it. It actually was too hard. It was like hard for me to watch. And then as I saw it, maybe like at least twice in the theater, so I'm a big Aronofsky fan. Yeah. Then all of a sudden it kind of clicked with me, and then I was like, wow, this movie really is amazing in terms of all the things that it's touching on, in terms of like, Natalie Portman's character having this, the darkness that's inside of her, this other side of her personality that has been suppressed through her mom, and also with herself, not really truly knowing herself. And then that allowed this dark side to kind of take over, because she couldn't control it because she was suppressed it for so long. But yeah, the score I found was super interesting too, in the fact that it does take so much from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, which I've never seen the ballet, but I'm a big Tchaikovsky fan and had listened to it growing up. I was a big fan of classical music, and he was one of my favorite composers. So I was very familiar with Swan Lake as a ballet, and at least the music. And I thought it was interesting how Clint used that in the score, in terms of like changing this music that is, there's obviously horrible parts in the ballet too, and there's some darkness, but he's almost like turned that into like a horror movie score.
Yeah.
And a lot of these movements that I was used to hearing, just, oh, this is some nice kind of relaxing Swan Lake, put it on. Like all of a sudden now it's been transformed in the way that he's using it into this like dark kind of, like a score that Bernard Herrmann would do or something for a Hitchcock thriller. And I thought that was really brilliant of how he was bringing in those elements of Tchaikovsky into what this score was doing. And much to your point, fits in very well with the theme of the film too, about unlocking the suppressed darker sides of yourself and then letting that kind of take control over you. And I think the score, when used in those moments where Natalie Portman's character is, fighting against her dark side and how he uses certain aspects of Swan Lake, it is great. It's definitely one of the things that makes this film so interesting to me, at least. And like when recently watching it for this even was actually like, I liked it even more than I did even 10 years ago when I all of a sudden came around to it. I guess once I kind of cracked what the movie was trying to say, it just resonates with me a lot more in terms of the darker sides of yourself and knowing yourself better to then a way to control that. The score is great. Not one of my favorites of Clint and Aronofsky's partnerships. Fountain, I like my favorite collaboration between those two. But this score is also great.
Yeah, it's sort of more about what it's doing for the movie, right? Like I think creating this tone, and that's sort of what this represents for me. Like this is one of, at least in my memory of the scores that I actually listened to, this is like a great example of how a score can really change the tonality of the movie and communicate that.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.